Let's say someone's not doing the inventory management piece for their fleet parts. What are some of the challenges that they really have going on day to day?
There's a lot of challenges that can arise. You can't really track any of your spend, which can be a huge cost center for some businesses. Just keeping track of maybe you have the part, but where is it? And how do I get it to the job so that it's there?
You can go broke or spend all your cash tied up in stuff that's not producing now, tied up in inventory that you're not using, inventory that you're not selling.
How do you see contractors or people that are managing fleets keep track of the details?
It does start with just getting the data in somewhere, figuring out what you have, getting that documented into some sort of system, and then over time starting to track that, because I think that's where you start to get some of that real value.
Knowing how to do it and starting to look at the information that it provides. We don't have to know everything before we get started, because that's where it really drags out and gets complicated.
Expert advice, practical tips, real-life stories. Have less stress, more time, and more money in your business. Welcome to the Cash Flow Contractor.
Martin, what a small world. We have, I don't know where you were born, Martin. I was born in Norman, Oklahoma. Were you born?
I was born in Norman, Oklahoma, yeah.
And Andrew, we found out, was born in Norman, Oklahoma. What a small world. And we've never met. It wouldn't be that small world if he was down the street and you're in Huntsville, Alabama. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Would have never thought you'd start every day you jump on a podcast with someone and they're born in the same city as you. So
yeah,
fun times. So Martin, last week we did an episode with Erin Gilchrist, and she's with IntelliShift, and we talk a lot about fleet management. And we learned a lot about how to even think about purchasing vehicles for your fleet, how to, route vehicles for your fleet, how to make sure that they're all up to date, registered, all those things.
Gather information.
Yeah. And Andrew
make decisions.
Works with Fleetio, and they integrate directly with IntelliShift. And so this will be kind of a complementary episode in some respects. In some respects, it'll be completely different. But Andrew, why don't you tell us what Fleetio is for our audience?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So Fleetio is a maintenance management platform. So we really help fleets to track and analyze their operations. So that starts from an inspection, but it includes all of the work down the line from service, which is where you might use parts, or even just your inventory tracking it day to day.
Okay. So we want to talk about that inventory piece specifically because it's a big issue. And obviously, Fleetio probably starts with inventory management for specifically your car parts that you're managing, or I say car, your fleet parts, because I know it's more than just your car. It could be your forklift or whatever other assets you have.
Could be your truck.
Yes.
Could be your truck. But I think the piece that I'm really interested in as well is for our contractors that have parts for their jobs, i.e. materials, tracking that through Fleetio. So what do you typically see with inventory? Like, let's say someone's not doing the inventory management piece for even just their fleet parts. What are some of the challenges that they really have going on day to day?
There's a lot of challenges that can arise. First, you can't really track any of your spend on your inventory, which can be a huge cost center for some businesses. Another big issue is like if you need a part for your business and you don't have it on hand, and then like you have to either go track it down for a job, or maybe it's on back order, and so you have to wait even more than just a day to get it. That can really impact your business. So those are a couple of the challenges. There are others as well, just keeping track of maybe you have the part, but where is it? And how do I get it to the job so that it's there?
Yeah. Yeah, Martin, we've seen some really interesting cases where people don't even think they have any money in their inventory. Then there's just 200 grand sitting out in the shop. So Martin, I mean, why do you feel like inventory is so challenging for contractors? Martin.
You asking me?
I'm asking you. What, from your perspective?
Because it's keeping track of detail, and keeping track of detail involves discipline and focus and all the, the same reason people don't like to keep books. because books at its core is just keeping track of details. And that's not fun. It gets away from you quickly. Like you might be caught up through last night and you go through today and you realize, oh, I'm not caught up anymore. And then another day and I'm not caught up. Then you're into this tedium. So, I mean, that's one reason why. Second is there's some, I'm speaking, Andrew, you're going to speak to this better than I, but there has to be a system of process that you can tell, I need to keep 150 of this Fram oil filter on hand because I use them all the time. And everybody knows that, but nobody has any, right? Oh, and what Andrew said, where are they? Well, they're at the Oklahoma City location. Oh no, Bob has those in his, I mean, it's just keeping track of detail. And when you're a harried business owner, keeping track of detail is crazy. It's important because you can go broke or spend all your cash tied up in stuff that's not producing now, right? So you have a lot of money tied up in inventory that you're not using, inventory that you're not selling if you have that kind of inventory in there as well. Or the opposite, as we said earlier, you need that part. It's critical to keep the thing going. And I don't have it. Thought I did, don't have it. So now we got to get it. Well, it's got to come out of Paris. Or for a lot of our contractors and manufacturers, a lot of machine tools come out of Italy. And so you're going, oh, well, how long does it take a jet to get here from Italy? Well, not that long, but Italy shuts down in August. They do.
Why is that?
Anyway, Italy, Germany, France. Seriously, Khalil, you're from...
I mean,
You're
Morocco shuts
erudite.
down in August. That's where my family's from.
No.
Everyone's on vacation.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what... I mean, I'm being a little facetious, but not really. They shut down in August.
Yeah.
They
Interesting.
They opened up after COVID in Italy. Biesi did. Opened up, were open for about a month after being shut down for COVID, and then shut down for August to go on vacations.
That's
Anyway,
crazy.
We're far afield. You asked why it's keeping track of a lot of details.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do.
So how do you see contractors or, people that are managing fleets, Andrew, keep track of the details? What works, what doesn't?
So it does start with just getting the data in somewhere. And so maybe that's just getting the number of parts because, Martin, as you mentioned, it's hard to keep track of all of the data, right? You could record everything down to the last drill bit. You could list out all the vendors and the manufacturers and where you got it all. And so I think the easiest place to start is just figuring out. And sometimes you have to start fresh. What do we have on hand right now? Getting that documented into some sort of system. And then over time, starting to track that, because I think that's where you start to get some of that real value is you can see, okay, what am I using on a monthly, quarterly, yearly basis? And that gives you a little bit better of a feel. And then you can add on and layer in all the details that you want. But I think it starts with just starting to track, what parts do you have and, maybe where are they?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like for a lot of people, it's the numbers game in their mind of just yeah, I've got that. And then that's over there. But as you grow, it gets a little bit harder. And that knowing that number for inventory is really significant, especially if you want to grow. We talked about this in a previous episode, Martin, but if you want to double your business, well, you probably need to double your inventory more than likely, unless you get extremely efficient with just in time and all that kind of stuff.
But it's going to go up. Yeah.
But it's going to go up, right? So, and same thing with your receivables. Your receivables are likely going to increase as well, maybe double, to be able to handle that additional business that you're selling. So really valuable. With Martin, we were talking before this a little bit about the value of just 1%, because I know that this is an area of waste for companies. Why don't you speak to that for a second?
Well, two things I'd like to talk about. One thing I just noticed, Andrew, you said just get started. If you'll recall Aaron Gilchrist talking about how to get started with fleet management, she said, stick in a GPS with an ECM module and start gathering information. Just start there.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what you just said. start there. Just gather some information, figure out the difficulty is how to do that. But just gather the information and just get started. Started knowing how to do it and starting to look at the information that it provides. We don't have to know everything before we get started, because that's where it really drags out and gets complicated. Now to your second question. One of the things, Andrew, that we talk about a lot is the power of small changes. And I've been on a thing, I had a workshop yesterday and we did this. It's just a fact that the average company in the United States makes 7% net profit. Okay, 7% of sales before taxes. So $1 million, you make $70,000. If you can increase your margins by 1%, for example, from 40% gross profit to 41% gross profit, you will increase your net profit by 14.5%. It's 14.5 to 1 leverage, right? So
Yeah.
it's worthwhile figuring out things to do that can save you 1%. It's literally more, it's a nominal 1% from 40 to 41. That's a little more. But anyway, you get the point. So we were talking to people about that. And I think we're going to do a whole show about it in the future. But in this workshop, there are things you can raise your prices 1%. You can stop, take credit cards that charge all this. But one of the things that came up was manage your inventory properly. And you can't tag that necessarily. If I do this, it'll save me 1%. It might save you 15%. Might save you 0.5% on half of your jobs, 2% on, anyway, managing inventory. What essentially, a lot of inventory becomes scrap.
Yeah.
Gets put in a warehouse and driven over by a forklift because nobody knew it was underneath those boxes, right? So anyway, it's worth it. It's worth it.
So Andrew, I want to hear a little bit about like the ideal inventory management system that a contractor could have in place. They've got, a shop with all these materials. They take materials out on trucks. What's the like ideal system or setup that you would recommend or that you see?
Yeah. So we, as we were talking about, so the first piece is like figuring out what you have. And I do want to acknowledge, like you said, like you could have a whole warehouse of all of this stuff. It could take days to go through all of that. Maybe that's not a practical way to start. And so one of the things that can be really beneficial is like, look at the next week of business and figure out what are you going to need for that, and then go find that stuff, get that into the system. And then, week by week, you can get ahead. Maybe you get ahead by a month, maybe you get ahead by a year. And that's where I think you start to see some of those benefits that Martin, you were sort of talking about, is like this idea that maybe you could right size your inventory. Maybe you have a lot of stuff that's sitting there over on a shelf that you don't even know about. And you, over time, like you want to be able to forecast, here's my book of business, here's what I'm looking to do. I know that I have these parts, or I know that I need to get these parts by this date so that my business can go out and do the things that it needs to do. And then from there, like one of the ways that you could explore starting to trim those costs is like ordering in bulk. If you're doing like onesie twosies, going to purchase parts from a retailer, that can really eat into your margins versus, hey, over the next month, over the next 3 months, I know I'm going to need 500 of part X. So I can go purchase those at a volume discount. And then you have that in your system, it's ready to go. And then you can decrement it and say, okay, I have 150 left. When should I start to reorder? When should I look at adding more parts?
Yeah. Yeah. So you get all of the parts tracked. You have all of your data, and then you can start to streamline and optimize when you order, how many you carry, understanding what's the term whenever it's in and out, but essentially like your turnover, right? What your turnover is.
Inventory turns.
Yeah, you can start to know your inventory turns. So what are like some of the tools that are out there that help you do those things? Because I can imagine doing this on pen and paper isn't great.
Yeah.
I'm sure a spreadsheet could work at a certain level, but how do you keep up with it consistently and efficiently?
So like you said, you can start with pen and paper, you can start with a spreadsheet, and those are all valid options. But then once you start to do real scale, those things get kind of gnarly to keep up with. And so there's software out there. Fleetio is one of those platforms. There's other platforms that may be dedicated to parts and inventory management. But one of the things that we see with software is like, can you get your team involved in a business? Because as you mentioned, like if you're a business owner, it's hard for one person to like do it all. But if you have someone out there going and doing job X, they can note really quickly in like a mobile app that, hey, I use this many parts. And that's not something that at the end of the week, you like get all of the information from all of the jobs you've done and you try and enter it. And then maybe something slips through the cracks. You just note it when it happens. And then you can be more strategic as you're going into, the next week or whatever your time period looks like to keep track of, okay, here's how much I'm using. Again, here's what's coming up. And then how can I start to plan ahead of that? And you can start to get sophisticated with how are you accounting for your inventory? Are you just averaging out your costs? Are you billing them like, hey, I got it for $1.10 this one time and now it's $1.15? Or are you using like a LIFO, FIFO type system?
We should clarify LIFO and FIFO for our audience.
So LIFO is last in, first out. So the last part that would come into your inventory would be the first inventory or piece that you would use. So I just brought it in and I'm using it immediately versus first in, first out. You bring in a piece or a part and you use that, your oldest piece of inventory first, and then your next oldest next.
We might explain why this even matters. It's an accounting issue,
Yes.
but when you're talking about the last part in might have cost $2 and the first part in might have cost $1. So if you take the last one out and charge it to a job, it costs that job $2. If I take the first one out, it only costs that job $1. Right. This is really arcania. People don't have to worry about this. Their accountants will do it, right? The other one is average. So you average the cost of all of them, and it's a constantly moving average. But it has to do with not which part did you take out, but what cost did you take out and apply to that job, if that makes sense.
Martin, I'll give you a chance to share your fish joke.
Okay. Well, it's a pretty good one. It's an inventory joke, man. There are not a lot of people telling inventory jokes. Now there's LIFO, FIFO, and fish. Last in, first out. First in, first out. Last in, or first in, still here.
Still here.
Meaning I'm not selling my inventory. I used to run a feed store in Nebraska, and we always talked about the bags on the bottom were fish inventory. They're the first ones here, but you literally had to take all these 50-pound bags off a pallet, put the top ones on the bottom of another pallet, and do that every so often. Otherwise, that stuff, the fish inventory would sit here for years. So,
man.
Anyway.
Okay. So what does it look like practically? So you had mentioned, Andrew, that like having an app for your team members to be able to use to track things. What does that actually look like with Fleetio?
Yeah. So we have both mobile and web components to our platform. So our web version is maybe what you would use if you're a fleet manager or maybe a technician or an operations manager. You're sitting in your office, you have your computer. That works. But then the mobile component is you're out in the field. You're like doing a job or you're getting ready to go to a job and you just need to maybe perform an inspection, or you need to quickly note, hey, I use this many parts on this job and I'm going to pull that out of inventory and notate that cost somewhere. And so that's what the mobile app really allows you to do, is like you're on the go. You have your smartphone in your pocket. You can just have this app, log in, spend less than 5 minutes noting what happened, and then go about your day versus trying to keep track of it after the fact or going to like a computer to note that somewhere.
And so in practice, do you have to add a barcode to every single one of your products to be able to track this?
So I think that's where you can be as flexible and as practical as like how much time do I have to dedicate to this. So if you have like just a box of parts, you could have the barcode on the box, and then you could just decrement like, okay, there's 20 parts in a box. Now there's only 15 because I used 5. For some of the more high cost parts, so if you spent like $50, $100 or more on a part, maybe then you want to start looking at putting a barcode on those individual pieces. But if you have something that's like, 20 cents or $1, or, even $5 for a part, maybe you just put a barcode on the box, or if it's on a shelf somewhere, put a barcode on the shelf where it's at. And then you can just decrement your inventory against that.
Like, would I be able
How
to just
many,
go by the box and like scan it with my phone and it would notate that one was taken?
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
when you're transferring, you can adjust it. So if you just use one, like the default is 1. But if you use like 5, 10, or maybe you are moving it to a different location, you can transfer like 10 to a different location.
Gotcha. So probably a lot of legwork to get started. Really, with any software, it's kind of like that. The implementation is the hardest
Yeah.
part. But then if you can create the habits inside of your team members to, okay, this you have to do this. Like, this is how we do it going forward. You're not just taking parts at any time. Then you can create that rhythm of just, okay, yeah, this is how we check out materials. It's an SOP.
Right. Yes, exactly. Software, we love to think that it's just like super easy and intuitive, maybe from our industry, but then it's like, yeah, your biggest challenge is the human behavior. It's like, we've done it this way for 10 years and you're going to tell me that it doesn't work. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
we're going to tell you that like, hopefully we can make your job easier. And this is an opportunity, like just try it for a month and let's see where we land. And usually what happens is if you can get a good faith attempt at, let's just put like a month's worth of data in here and see where it takes us and what we're able to see on the reporting side. I think when you come out of the other end, you're like, oh, okay, I can start to see some of the benefits here of really tracking and having one centralized place to have all of this data.
how many individual discrete barcoded parts do you typically see? I mean, that's kind of a stupid question. It can be anything from nothing to a million, but medium-sized companies, what kind of number do you see?
Yeah,
How many items are they tracking?
like you said, it can really vary. And we have customers across different industries. So we have like trucking companies, but we also have contractors, construction, landscape. And so it does vary. But I would say like for a mid market, you could have like hundreds into thousands of parts. And again, it all depends on how much of it you want to track and to what level of granularity, but hundreds to thousands of parts. And then you can have tens of thousands of dollars in our inventory system. That's one of the things that you can see sort of a bubble up view is not only how many parts, but what's the total value of that inventory.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
you touched on this, but it kind of occurs to me too that if you're getting started, just start with anything that's over $100.
Exactly.
We're not going to chase screws, but just start with that.
Right.
Okay. So I want to cover like some of the things that, once you get this in place, what you're going to start to notice, not just from like a financial standpoint, feeling more organized, knowing exactly what you need, but what are the, what does that cause inside of your company? Obviously, we've already talked about the 1% and how, these small changes, and this is kind of a big change probably for most people that are in our audience, but what are they going to start to notice day to day? What are they going to start to notice in terms of project life cycles? What are some of the things that you see from customers of Fleetio?
Yeah, so there's a couple of elements. The first is like peace of mind, right? Sort of intangible, but it's really valuable as you're thinking about trying to keep track of all of these different things as a business owner is, like what is the state of my inventory? And can I confidently say like I am currently prepared today for the jobs that I have tomorrow? So I'll put that in like a separate category. More on the tangible side, as you mentioned, it's like, can I right size my inventory? Do I have stuff sitting on a shelf that not only am I not using, but I don't even know if I would be able to use it because I don't know what it is. So identifying what inventory you have on hand. And then I think another piece of it is like starting to feel like you have control over what does that procurement look like. I know that you can just send a guy to go buy, the 5, 10 parts that you need, but then can you be more strategic? Can you start to purchase ahead of time? And then as we were talking about, like with the inventory valuation methods, it is sort of arcane and it's like, oh, your accountant will take care of that. But it does have legitimate impacts to like, what are you able to write off from a tax perspective? And that does impact your cash flow, right? So I think it starts small as we talked about, and it's hard. It takes a lot of effort to get everything incorporated. But over time, it does give you a greater sense of control. And then it can also really help to ground your team together to understand what is our current inventory. And it's not just you being like, hey, do we have the parts on hand? It can be like, hey, I think we're about to run out of this. And maybe our software system said, hey, you have a low stock alert. You used 10 of this part over the past week, and it's time to consider reordering.
Yeah. Having those automated reminders and even triggers. Does Fleetio connect to any like supply houses where it will automatically order things, or no, it's still kind of a manual process?
Yeah. So today we do not currently connect to any of those, but that's something we've heard and we've seen that people are really eager to just directly order parts from our platform. So something we're looking at. I don't have anything to report there yet, but currently it is a manual process.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I would even just think the amount of, it's not even just about the inventory, but it's about what that allows you to do from project to project. You're not having to run to the supply house randomly and waste time from being on the job site. You're able to know exactly what you need ahead of time to get the job done. Everyone's more organized and clear. You know what exactly is out on the trucks and what's not. I think there's just so many ways that getting this handled for the right stage companies can be a huge lift. So very interesting. So what is it like to get onboarded with Fleetio? And if people are interested in Fleetio, what are we talking about with cost? What should they expect? How can we set expectations for people with getting started in inventory management?
Yeah, I'll start with costs. So our costs are public online. So Fleetio.com, you can go there and see exactly. We have 3 different plans, and the prices are public for those. And so it's all based on per vehicle. So we don't charge per seat. We think that fleet management is an activity that is best performed by a team. And so there's no charge. You can add as many people as you want. And then for the implementation piece, there's a bunch of different options. Some teams, like if you're small enough, we have onboarding packages that you can purchase where someone will help you get all of your data into Fleetio. They'll give you sort of the best tips and tricks, and you can have like 6 months to really get comfortable with it. For some people, they're like, no, I need to hit the ground running and do it today and start to track that information. And so from that side, in the platform, we actually have sort of a training wheel situation where you can get exposed quickly to the most high value parts of the platform, decide what's for you to tackle today versus like 6 months to a year down the road, and then really quickly get set up. And then the other piece is like, even if you're not purchasing onboarding, we have support available. And that's not a charge type situation. Like you can access it for free. We have help center articles. So there's a lot of resources out there. And then even if I want to plug this as well, is like, we think Fleetio is great. We think there's a lot of businesses that can really help. But even if you're not ready to take the leap, there are a lot of great resources on our website for free, including some templates around like, how could you manage your inventory?
Okay, excellent. We'll link to that in the show notes. And just so listeners know, obviously this episode's airing in September 2024 and prices change. But for that inventory part side, it looks like it's average $10 per vehicle is how it's billed. And that includes a lot of stuff that's not really related to inventory management from my mindset. But maybe include kind of what they're also getting outside of just the inventory management.
Yeah. So $10 is our like top tier platform. And it is inclusive, as you said, of a lot of stuff. So IntelliShift, if we're referencing them, like if you have a telematics provider, we can pull in that data so you can tell where your vehicle is at any given time. If you have a fuel card provider where you're using a fuel card to purchase all of your fuel, we can automatically pull in all of that data. And then there's a lot of really tailored functionality. So tires are a big expense for fleets. We have a dedicated tire module. So you can track like what is your tread depth, your pressure, all of that stuff. And then if you have warranties, this is more so maybe applicable to really expensive parts for your fleet, but you may need to like look at how many credits you can recoup for a part that you're using if it's like prematurely replaced and it's still under warranty. So lots of stuff, as you mentioned, nested under that can really be beneficial to some fleets out there.
Yeah, no, really great. Seems like a reasonable price as well. So good to see. Man, Andrew, anything else that you can plug for Fleetio and anything that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, the last thing that I'll say is like if you're curious for more information, even just about like our parts and inventory, again, our Fleetio.com website, you can go there and see like live view of what it looks like. Our trial is free for 14 days. So if you just want to hop in, no credit card required, just see what the platform looks like, that's an option as well.
Excellent. Well, great talking to you, Andrew. Really one of our few episodes that we have on just inventory. So good to talk about that. And we'll put all the links to Fleetio in the show notes for listeners. And we appreciate your time.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Martin and Khalil. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning into the Cash Flow Contractor. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Visit thecashflowcontractor.com. See you next episode.